The first question is, what techniques should we implement to make sure the stakes are high enough for our characters? So the first part of this question is that it depends on the genre. So we can't assume that all things are going to be equal for every genre. Different genres are going to have different expectations. So there are different techniques that you would implement if you were writing a mystery, a thriller, a horror, a romance, science fiction, fantasy. So it does depend on your genre. I do know that the person who submitted this question is writing romance, and also considering women's fiction. And so I'm going to answer first for romance and women's fiction, and then I'll talk a little bit about the other genres, just touching lightly on them. So when we're thinking about making sure that the stakes are high enough in a romance for the characters, of course, the romance is going to be central to this. So you want to make sure then, if you want to have these high stakes, that there is a conflict, both external and internal. The external conflict is that conflict that is keeping the characters apart and driving them from outside of them. So it's not their own feelings keeping them apart, it's some other thing that is keeping the characters apart. And this could be even something as simple as it's a long distance relationship, and that's the conflict. So the external conflict is the distance. Internal conflict would be, fears, trauma, emotional wounds. Those are the things that are the internal conflict. So making sure that you have those in place, those two things, external and internal conflict, for your characters in a romance is going to help make the stakes higher. Also making sure that their goals are clear and their motivation. So if you're following along, that means I've mentioned Goal, Motivation, Conflict, which is a book by Deborah Dixon that you can certainly look at if you want more on this topic. But making sure that we know what they want and what they're striving towards, because if we don't know their end goal, if we don't know what their motivations are, we cannot know whether or not what their struggles are. We can't know if they're making it or not making it, or what they're trying to achieve. So in order to have stakes that are high for the characters, you need to make sure that those things are clear on page. Now, the next thing, and this is something that can work in different genres, and this is something that I talk about in my Pacing Demystified class. So if you want more on this, you can check out that course, and I just popped that link into the chat. You can use escalating events in order to keep raising the stakes. So escalating events, in short, are when you keep asking, okay, what now? What else could happen? What else could happen that's bad to this character? What other thing could become a barrier or an obstacle? So if you keep escalating the tension and escalating what's happening to the character, that also can create higher stakes. And of course, just having them have some struggles, some conflict of any kind is going to be really important. And you don't want to overdo the escalating events. So be careful with that. So that's a little bit on romance. Now, I said that was specifically for romance, but I should clarify that that information about the character's goals, motivation, conflict, that goes across all genres. You want to make sure that you have that in all your genres, whether it's mystery, science fiction, horror, thrillers, fantasy, whatever you're writing, you want that on page. You want that goal motivation on page so that the conflict is clear. Now, when you're writing horror, you can raise the stakes by increasingly bringing in more danger, more suspense, more fear factors, things for the characters to be afraid of. You can do psychological, it can be action, it can be physically oriented. So the fear and the horror can come in different elements, and you can raise the stakes by continuing to put the characters in more danger and having more horrifying things happening to them. When we're talking about mystery, you raise the stakes by making them race against a timeline. There's a deadline, maybe. There's some sort of importance for figuring out the mystery. And of course, figuring out the mystery, there is a satisfaction figuring out the mystery for itself. But when you have stakes, when something is at stake, maybe it's proving somebody's innocence, releasing somebody from jail. Maybe the mystery is solved so somebody doesn't go to jail. To maybe the mystery is solved for just to get justice. But in a mystery, you want to have something at stake in order for that to be important. So you would keep raising those. The same would be, it would be similar with thriller. In a science fiction fantasy, you can raise the stakes by having the fate of the world or the fate of a people or even the fate of a character resting on the actions of the characters. So there are different ways to raise stakes in different genres, but at the core of it are a couple of things. One is you need the character to have a clear goal, a clear motivation, and clear conflict. And it can help if you have a deeper point of view, if you're creating something that's closer to the character so that the reader feels like they're connected, they are invested in what is happening to the character, and they have to know what happens next. And they are increasing tension because it is a very important to them that the character wins, that the character comes out on top. So that is a few ways that you can raise the stakes for your characters. Just being clear and with yourself what the plot is, using escalating events, and making sure that goal, motivation, conflict are clear.